a tweet notification. Why is it doing that? Okay, there we go. And all right, so we are now live. We're recording. It is Talking About Survivor with Christiana and Mike. We're going to talk tonight about Survivor San Juan del Sur, Episode 4, and I think the question of the evening is Drew really that stupid, or did he blow it on purpose? What do you think?
Blow the game or the challenge?
Well, I think clearly he blew the challenge, but
right.
I don't know, maybe it's just the part of me that always wants to try to give people the benefit of the doubt, like in terms of not just being stupid. But like I'm half convinced that he was self-sabotaging his game here. It's just hard for me to imagine him really thinking that he was playing well. But maybe
I really think he thought he was. I think he, like, the self-centeredness and the ego that he displayed in his confessionals made me think that he just was oblivious to the fact that this was a bad move. He really thought he had, like, you know, and maybe he's almost like maybe it's a combination actually. If you think maybe he just is like so like sociopath that he just doesn't care, like didn't care. He was going to do this. He thought he was untouchable, and he wasn't going to worry about whether or not it actually blew up in his face. Mm-hmm. He just didn't care, you know, about whether it worked or not, and so he was just running down the line of, I don't care if people aren't being responsive, because they should be, and if not, then screw it, you know? Because he didn't seem all that bent out of shape that he got sent home either. So.
Well, that's kind of part of what I was thinking, is that his behavior just seemed so calculated to make people not like him. But then again, and then he also just didn't seem that upset or shocked at what happened. I mean, John seemed more surprised than he did. Yeah. But then again, maybe that's just his whole laid-back shtick that he's got. You know what I mean? It's like just nothing rocks him that much because he's just so self-involved that nothing that happens outside of himself matters very much. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just being too generous because his behavior, he played so badly. So for him to...
None of them really played that great on this team.
Well, yeah. It's kind of funny in retrospect that they did win so many challenges because clearly they're a mess. You know, they're good at challenges, but nothing else apparently.
No, I mean, the fact that, like, there were so many people so adamant on what they thought everybody should vote for that they just went ahead and voted however they felt like, it was kind of weird. Like, what? Like, how did Jeremy think that anyone else was joining him in that vote?
Well, there was all sorts of weird voting because Jeremy didn't actually vote for Keith. He wasn't even the Keith vote.
That's right.
I'm pulling up the list of the votes just to nail it down precisely, but it was all over the place.
Yeah, it didn't make sense.
Yeah, so Jeremy voted for Drew. John was the Keith vote. The two votes for Julie were Reed and Keith. Drew himself was the only person who voted for Kelly, and then everybody else voted for Drew. So that's so Jeremy voted for Drew, and then also the four girls, Julie, Kelly, Missy, and Natalie, all voted for Drew, and then Jeremy voted with them. Which, in a lot of ways, despite his, I think, entirely reasonable anger and frustration with Keith, the fact that he voted with the girls in this in becoming the majority, whether he had decided to do that in advance or whether he just was able to tell which way the wind was blowing, I think shows some good perception skills on his part.
I mean, this was so bizarre.
It was pretty weird. I think maybe it was just that they had gotten into this routine of winning everything, and so that they were just so fundamentally unprepared. And yet, the whole thing of Jeremy and Keith and the idol question happened before that. So I guess it was really just sort of, they built a quick foundation, but not ultimately a strong one. You know what I mean? It's like they were solid quickly, and that allowed them to win these early challenges, but then it just all crumbled at once. But yeah, anyway, so this I think this has been a season so far, or at least 2 of the 4 episodes. The last 2 have featured very satisfying vote outs, in my opinion. I mean, this one in particular, it's one thing to say he got a bad edit, which I think is almost certainly true. But at the same time, they choose who to give a bad edit based on the material that they are provided with.
Exactly.
And there are lots of things he said and the way he acted in several situations that just makes me convinced that they probably didn't have to cherry pick only those moments, and then they cut out all the bits where he actually sounded smart and sensitive and considerate and self-aware. That's my guess, is that they did not just have to eliminate those things.
No, I think by the way that it all went down, it's pretty clear he was not very self-aware, or he's the most self-aware person and just didn't want to be on the game anymore.
Yeah, and at the same time, it could be, like if he didn't want to be on the game anymore, but he also didn't want to think of himself as the kind of person who would just quit. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know. It's also true that it just seems like everything we hear about him makes him just seem like that total older brother screw up who was probably cool within some subgroup of high school culture and then kind of never really grew out of that. And people kind of keep putting up with him, but it's working less and less as he gets older. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah.
So let's jump back to the beginning of the episode. Then we begin with some apologies to Dale for not telling him that they were all going to vote out John, but Alec is pretty straightforward and basically just saying we didn't know if we could trust you not to tell him or not. And Dale is smart enough to recognize that that was a reasonable like it's hard to blame them on that part, so now he realizes he's got to do something to try to reintegrate into the tribe so that he does not become isolated as the one guy who wanted to keep John Rocker.
Right. And he seemed to look at it from the right perspective, is that what we should do first is try to win immunity. I mean, I think he said that, like, if we don't have immunity, then I'm the one on the outs. So it wasn't like I need to start planning for us not to lose, to win. So I like that he at least had that awareness.
Yeah. Meanwhile, back over at Hunapu, we have Natalie finds the flint, and it's just right there by the fire pit. Which I
Yeah.
couldn't help but wonder. It's like right there by the fire pit. It's like, okay, how could they not have found it if that's really where it was? But then you also maybe wonder if someone else found it somewhere else and then sneaked it back there to be found because they sort of like they would have realized, oh wait, I accidentally put it in my bag and forgot. So let's sneak it back by the fire pit so someone else will find it and I don't get blamed. I mean, that's conspiracy theory level stuff, I suppose, but it just seemed like she found it just by accident. It was just kind of half buried in the sand right next to the fire pit. I mean, how would they not find it there?
The most reasonable explanation is that it was actually buried in the sand somehow, and just through their foot traffic, they had unburied it enough that she eventually found it.
I mean, but it just seems like digging up all the sand around the fire pit is exactly the first place you would look. I mean,
this is not the tribe that has made the most well-informed decisions.
That is true. That is true. This is again me trying to give people perhaps more benefit of the doubt than they really merit. So they're all kicking themselves.
You had an alliance with somebody, and you were going to look out for them. You wouldn't immediately go tell their other alliance that they definitely have the idol.
Well, especially, and it's just especially ironic that he would do that when he doesn't actually have, he was wrong. He just hadn't found it yet. And so it was not even like he was right and it was actual information he was passing on. He was speculating. Keith seems like a likable guy, but this really demonstrated he really has no idea what he's doing in playing this game. He questioned the idea that a sub-alliance was a thing.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard thing. In fact, it's like in Boston Rob's 101.
Yeah, exactly it is. And not only that, you don't really even have to be a Survivor fan to acknowledge that it would be possible for a team to have a closer knit team subset. That's not he's a firefighter, right? Surely there are firefighters in his firehouse that get along better with each other than they do with everybody else. They form their own little mini clique. Even if you're all part of the larger team, they're also a sub team. It's this is not a difficult concept. But I wonder if part of that was just he really did it originally without thinking at all, and then when called on it, he tried to just cover. He got defensive because he was being called on it, and he was trying to say, well, he didn't want to say, oh, I'm sorry, I guess that was stupid, I wasn't thinking. He would rather try to spin it like it wasn't a stupid thing to do, even though it's pretty stupid. I mean, because clearly it's not even like he gained anything from it. You know what I mean? It's like...
No, he gained negative things.
The people he told immediately went and told Jeremy what he had said. So it's not like he gained an in with them for exchanging the information. What they realized is, oh, guess what? Our alliance can't count on you because you're trying to stir up shit. Especially rumor stuff. It's not like he has it. You guessed that he has it because you hadn't found it yet, which you then proceeded to do later. And then, of course, at that point is when you say, well, I'm not going to tell anybody. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not saying he should have told people when he did find it. That's not the solution to this problem, but it's like...
was go apologize and say, you know what, I said that defensively. It was a speculation. I have no idea if he has it or not. It was just I got defensive because I was looking and I hadn't found it, and that was the only solution I could come up with. But I honestly don't know if he has it or not, and I shouldn't have said it.
Well, and
Maybe that would cause some people to be like, what's different with him? But it would have been a better situation to be in than what he was in.
Yeah. Well,
I actually thought he was going to play it. Because
I wondered too. I think clearly what we realized from this is that Jeremy thought that he and Keith were a sub-alliance, but Keith was not aware of that. So even though it's easy to recognize that it was dumb, I think probably what Keith was thinking was really just this, oh, here's our team. I've come to a conclusion that sounds reasonable. I'm going to go talk to my teammates about it. And that might have been all he was thinking. He did not intend it to be a betrayal necessarily. He wasn't thinking of it like that. He wasn't trying to get something by trading this information. It just didn't occur to him that this kind of rumor spreading and talking behind people's back is bad Survivor playing. It's also kind of tacky just personally, but I mean, because Jeremy was exactly right when he was just saying, dude, you could come and ask me. I would have told you whether I had it or not. I thought we were in an alliance.
Right, and that's the thing. Jeremy's going to be an interesting player because he flows very quickly from reasonable to unreasonable, and then back.
Yeah, he's smart, but he's also very emotional.
Oh, he's incredibly impulsive, but then it was nice that he did eventually calm down and vote for the right person, but at the same time, he says something here completely reasonable and then goes and gets himself super worked up about the whole thing. It's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely am continuing to like him. I agree that the emotion and his impulsive nature might ultimately be his undoing. But generally speaking, I feel like he's got a charisma to him that I enjoy, and he does seem smart and aware if occasionally he lets his emotions get away with him. But get the better of him is what I mean to say. But at the same time, like that he was, I think, a little unreasonable in pushing for Keith. You could also make the case that it was not necessarily unreasonable. You know what I mean? It's like from the perspective of here's this old guy who's not necessarily that great at challenges anyway, and he's clearly trying to stir stuff up. I thought he had my back, I had his back, and here he's doing this. Maybe I do really want to get rid of him. That's not the argument
he used. Yeah. That's not the argument he used, though.
Well, he didn't talk about the challenges part, but he did that. I mean, was saying it's like he clearly does not know how to be in an alliance.
Yeah. I guess that's fair. I guess it was just with the passion that he came with it, it made it sound more unreasonable than it really.
Oh, sure. It certainly sounded like he's coming from a place of anger, right? Not strategy.
But you're right. When you actually break it down and think about it, it wasn't that bad of a target,
Right. And I think, he was pushing for it.
If it hadn't been like that, he probably wouldn't have been voted off.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is that clearly all of this was in chaos. And so it may well be that as soon as he realized that he didn't have agreement in the tribe that that's what they should do, he backed off and he was going to just try to see which way the wind was blowing with everybody else. And it may be that John ended up voting for Keith anyway because, as he said right before the votes, he was very confused about who he's supposed to be voting for now. Because of everything that kind of went down, he probably, who knows what his plan going into the tribal council was, but I think maybe he just got confused. So hard to know whether Jeremy still intended to vote.
I'm sure they didn't tell him.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm sure they did tell John that the ones that were all in agreement for Drew, because they felt like he and Drew he was Drew's closest ally, even if he doesn't see himself that way. Like, they definitely viewed him that way. And so they wouldn't have told him, like, Drew is it. So that all right, we're starting to parse out a little bit of, he may have thought because he works with Jeremy and he thought, or he might have just been confused. Like, his vote, I can understand why he didn't know what was supposed to happen. Because they definitely wouldn't have told him. Like,
right.
So.
Well, and I think it's also true that, I think all the chaos we saw was probably real, because when you have someone who's acting like Drew, where he's just going out, he's not even having conversations with anybody, he's just declaring things, and then everybody's having to kind of ripple around that, because, like, it's like you're trying to read the ripples on the pond, and then he just keeps dropping these big rocks right in the middle of it. It's like nobody can have a conversation because he's just standing there right in front of everybody saying things like, yeah, we're going to vote out Kelly. He's telling Missy, he's like, we don't even really trust you guys to vote. And then talking about the girls are going to vote out the guys when they're a minority.
That part was bizarre.
Yeah. I liked how incredulous they were at that whole line of reasoning of just like, what is he talking about? And not only that, but he ultimately kind of made that happen. Like, it wasn't gonna happen until he made it happen.
Yeah. This is one of the times where maybe I'm going to give him more credit than he's due. I feel like he did know they couldn't do it that time, which was part of why he was so aggressive.
Yeah. And
what he really meant was that if we go on board with somebody, with one of the guys, they go for Keith.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden now we're tied, and now the girls can start picking us off if we're not careful. I don't think he reasonably thought through that, but I believe that he kind of somehow cognizantly knew that, because if he really thought the girls could just vote out the guys, he wouldn't be so like, well, we don't even trust you to vote with us. And he knew that if all the guys voted with him, they would go off. Like, he did know, or that Kelly would go off. He knew that. He definitely knew that. Mm-hmm. So I have to think those statements were meant to be like, this is what could happen in the future if we're not careful. He just isn't that articulate, or that, whatever.
Well, I think that's probably partly true, at least, because I think it's clear that he was just trying to prevent that future, as opposed to thinking that they were going to be able to do it that time. But at the same time, remember when John wanted to target Julie, like, Drew didn't even let him finish the sentence. He just said, there's no reason to vote out Julie right now. Like, he was not even willing to consider any other girl. It's like, no, it had to be Kelly.
That was probably the weirdest.
Yeah.
It was very Brandon Hance in a way. Of, like, just, not for the same reasons, where he's just like, I'm attracted to her, so she must leave.
Right.
But it had as much lack of reasoning and aggressive determination as that same issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, we keep kind of skipping ahead, which is fine. But let's talk about some of his earlier goofiness, which is once they find the Flint, he is determined that he wants to try to trade back for the fishing gear with Probst. And everyone else is like, what, are you stupid? Why would he ever do that?
Well, and this is sort of, there were two pieces ahead of the vote that are what, make me feel like he didn't just get himself voted off on purpose, that he is really just this bizarre of a person. Because once he has decided something, it is, he's not a flip-flopper, that's for sure. Once he's made his decision, he is committed to the decision. So in this case, everyone told him this was a bad idea, but he had no interest in hearing that. He had already decided he was going to do it. And then obviously the other one is I'm going to throw the challenge, and which he didn't even actually decide. It was just a thing he said to a girl he was trying to impress, maybe.
Yeah, it seemed like it literally came out of nowhere right during that conversation. It's not like he planned ahead to tell her. It was just like, hey, yeah, maybe I'll even throw the challenge. And then she's sitting there kind of like, did you really just say that? Because that's kind of...
And once it came out of his mouth, he was like, yeah, I guess I said it. I'm willing to do it.
Well, clearly anything he says is genius, right? So if he said it out loud, it must be a good idea. But yeah.
I'll wait till we get to it, but I will give him another little bit of credit later. So
okay. Well, I will agree, I guess, though, that the attempt to negotiate for the fishing gear does not feel like the sort of thing that someone trying to get themselves voted off would do. I mean, it was aggressive and turned off his tribe mates, but it seemed motivated by really wanting to get the fishing gear back, as opposed to, I'm going to do this because it'll annoy people.
Yeah, he wanted to fish. He said that a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
Very distinctly. I want fish. I want fish. I wish we had fishing gear. I want some fish. And on he went.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Probst just did his thing and said, he just shut him down quick.
Yeah, well, again, it's just kind of like he's trying to make a selling point of this brand new flint. It's never been struck. And Probst is just like, I don't need a flint. What do I need a flint for? I'm going to go back to my air-conditioned condo in a nice hotel and sleep in a comfy bed. I mean, and then probably have, hibachi steak grilled. I mean, it's like, what do I need a flint for? There's no negotiating power there. Yeah.
Yeah. We've been struck it. He's like, oh, like a brand new out of the box flint. Like the process is so funny.
Yeah.
I don't need that. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is too, it's kind of like even before Drew gets his mouth open to talk to Probst, everyone else is like disavowing this. It's just kind of like, we're not part of this. This is his thing. He insisted on doing this. I mean, after Probst shamed them the last time, I don't understand how Drew could have possibly thought that this would get him anything other than just trying to, like, he decided he was the leader, apparently, wherever that came from. Just his ego, I guess. But, because he actually was saying, this is what a good leader does. Without me, these people would be nothing, Like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, part of it may have been, like, I think it also showcases maybe a little bit of why he wasn't upset at the end when he got voted off. It's like he kind of knows in the back of his mind it's not a good idea, but he doesn't care. Mm-hmm. So he's prepared that if it doesn't work, to just move on. Mm-hmm. Because he didn't seem particularly upset Probst wouldn't do it. Like, he seemed content with the fact that he had asked and that he thought it was kind of funny, and then he moved on from it. It's almost like how he treated the end of the episode. Like, well, this is I don't feel like doing anything else, so I'm going to do this. And if it gets me voted off, that's the consequence of me doing the thing I want to do.
Well, the other thing that he was probably able to convince himself at the end was, like, the whole reason he wanted to target Kelly was because he's saying she's a threat, and further, I'm worried that the girls are going to try to get me out because I'm a threat. They see me as a threat. And so I need to get out the people who are a threat to me. And so when they vote out him, in his mind, it's not because this guy's a dumbass and he is making our camp uncomfortable. It is, oh, well, they recognize me as a threat. What can I do?
Yeah, they were smart to get rid of me because I was the manipulator of minds.
Yeah.
Basically, that's also part of the truth. I think his ego wasn't going to allow him to defer to someone else to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he just wouldn't have done it. Or to tell him who to vote for. Even if someone presented a reasonable argument, like Julie, and saying, okay, if your thing is about getting out girls who are a threat, Julie is a girl, and they had reasons why they wanted to get rid of her.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't even listen because his like I said, his ego wouldn't allow it to be anything other than what he had decided.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that for a little bit, though, which is namely John's idea to get rid of Julie. I don't think that was really a great strategy either. I mean, the fact that Drew wasn't even willing to listen doesn't change whether that was a smart thing or not. But the actual plan of, like, well, I'm going to
reasoning.
Well, but he's standing there saying we want to vote out people who aren't part of a couple, when there's several other people who aren't part of a couple in the tribe, and also, what happens to that logic if Jacqueline gets voted out on the other tribe next? He's not going to be happy that he made such a big deal about voting out single people versus couples at that point. It seems it was kind of arbitrary because it's not clear that people without their loved ones would necessarily align with each other.
Knew they were merging.
Yeah.
Already.
Well,
he knew it was coming next week, so he was making decisions based on the merge of next week. You could look at it that way.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it was terrible, but it just, like, I didn't necessarily think that was a great strategy either. I mean, if you're looking for a reason to vote somebody off, it wasn't necessarily terrible, but it's a risky narrative to pursue when you already have, because you're dealing with a tribe that hasn't had to vote anybody out yet, you have 3 people on your tribe already that are single people, that don't have their loved one in the team anymore. And so you're going to alienate those 3 people, and then a 4th person because even if it's not him who has Jacqueline get voted out next, what if someone goes along with him on this plan and then their loved one gets voted out next? Like, it's an inherently unstable way to form an alliance.
Correct. No, you're right when you think about it from armchairing it. And I'm not saying that he was the right decision. I guess I just give him some credit for having more reasoning than at the time I felt like Jeremy. But now that you've explained it, it makes more sense that Jeremy actually had a legitimate reason to go for Keith. And Drew's Kelly vote, those both just seemed arbitrary and emotional, and so John's in juxtaposition to me seemed very reasonable. You've since convinced me otherwise.
Well, it's not necessarily terrible. It just has some downsides to it that I don't think he was fully considering.
Right.
It's like but at the same time, it's kind of like this is the first person in their tribe they're having to vote out, and the first person to go is frequently for dumb reasons. You know what I mean? And this isn't even necessarily a dumb reason. It's just an inherently risky strategy. You know,
Right.
it's like it might work out just fine that the people who decide to go along with this plan continue to have their loved ones in the game and are thus able to bond on that basis. But you can't control that.
Yeah, it probably would have worked out fine because we know the merge is coming. So how do you
Well, is it a merge or just a mix-up?
Oh, I didn't pay enough attention. I just heard drop your buffs.
Yeah, I think it might just be a mix-up.
Okay, well then, yeah, then it's different. If it was, yeah, if the merge was coming, then he'd be fine because then he could establish that narrative very strongly if the couples outweighed the singles, and he could say, you know, this is what we should do is get rid of all those single people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, yeah, I think a better reason.
Anyway, you know, because they carry a lot of weight because you know, they start making numbers odd, which is what you need to get majorities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually it's fairly advantageous to have a few single people because, you know, say there's, you know, 8 people, you know, 2 sets of 2 couples. Well, now that single person is the tipping point. Like you do kind of want them around. Like you don't want to eliminate all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, the another implication of it, though, because I mean it's a complex question, is the idea that if you vote out someone who is part of an intact couple, you risk angering the other person in that pair, right? If you vote out a single person, they don't have anyone else who's necessarily going to be mad, like you have Jeremy who is mad about Val going, for example. You know, like you potentially don't have that problem to deal with. But again, it's like there's lots of different things feeding into this.
Yeah. That's just a comfort thing. Like there's nothing that, you know, like Alec can't do anything if he's mad that Drew's gone. Like he can just be mad and make things uncomfortable. Like Jeremy's not going to like wage war on all 5 people that voted for Val. You know,
yeah,
can't do that. Like he's just not capable of it. One person versus the amount of people it takes to vote off your loved one, it doesn't mean anything. You know, he could try to steer his alliance that way, but his alliances obviously are going to try to go with what's in the best interest of everyone, not just the one angry person, if they're done right. So, you know, the anger thing is just it's to make you feel more comfortable. You know.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think we're agreed that it's complex, but I got the feeling that in proposing it, John hadn't fully thought through all of the different implications. Like
I would agree.
So it's not inherently a bad plan, but it was perhaps overly simplified. Anyway, we're doing a lot of things out of order this time.
I mean, we're not filing clerks. We don't have to.
That's true. I just
want more insight.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I just keep looking back at my notes to see what we should talk about next. Yeah. What did you think about the duel?
This was the John versus Jacqueline, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Trying to decipher my notes. I didn't write enough about the actual duel because I was so impressed by the way that the end of it delivered exactly everything that Survivor producers want out of a, you know, because they were, you know, it wasn't as, like, Jeremy and Val stuff was emotional, but this was emotional in a different way. Like, this was a, you know, like, there was so much pride with how they, like, dealt with each other. Like, they were really cute. Like, it was they're a good couple.
Yeah.
Based on this. So I was a little bit overwhelmed by that moment to even write down enough about the actual like mechanics of the duel. So.
Hmm. Well, and I noted also that they seemed like a good couple in that sequence, partly just because one of my snap judgments from the pre-show was that based on their little promo video, it seemed like she was maybe more into the relationship than he was. But I don't get that sense watching them on the show.
Yeah, I mean they really are, and one of my was that like they were this like pseudo like all American like hero couple, which is kind of how they've been promoted, and it was nice to see like a little bit of realism with that, but that still told that same narrative, like of being so proud of each other and like cheering each other on, and like of course yeah, it was good.
This is really unrelated tangent, but I spelled Jacqueline probably 6 different ways in my notes because I keep forgetting how hers is actually spelled. I think it is actually Jaclyn, but
Yeah, that's correct.
I kept writing it all sorts of different ways. So I was taking my notes. I'm just watching, like reading through it, and just Jaqe. Jack. I don't know why I would even type that one though. I don't like. Does any Jacqueline spell it with Jack? Anyway, though, no. I agree with you though about the duel because clearly that middle one being so much smaller was very clearly designed to have it be close at the end, right? To allow comebacks. That one's really hard to get, so the person who had been behind has time to catch up. And even if the person who gets there first is probably still going to win because they've had more time to try to get that really hard one, it becomes that much more tense because it's possible the person who is catching up could win.
Yes, that's right. So now you remind me because I didn't write down the game mechanic, but now that you reminded me of it, yes, it was a very good game mechanic.
Mm-hmm. I kind of liked the little sort of teeter-totter catapult thing. I feel like we haven't quite seen exactly that before. I mean, it's not totally foreign, but I just couldn't recall another one that was just like that.
No, I like that too because it allowed for different strategies. You could jump on it with both feet. You could stomp on it. Like, there are different ways that you can mess around with it to make it do what you needed to. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, though, John wins, and then they hug and say they love each other, which is sweet. He talks about, he kind of thought that it would be harder to send her, but he didn't feel that bad because he knows she can take care of herself. So that was kind of a nice bit. But then there was a little bit of weirdness. Because I guess I hadn't picked up at this point that John and Drew were close because all we had seen was the rest of the tribe being annoyed with Drew. And so I didn't get why John kept defending Drew. Like, he would say, "Oh, I'm sending Drew because he pulls his weight for the most part, unless you're napping." But then also,
I also didn't get it at this point. Yeah, I was just echoing what you said. I felt the same way. It was like I couldn't understand if he was making fun of Drew and sending him because they don't like him and they think he's useless, or because he liked Drew and like he was like, "Oh, that's my boy. He'll be good,"
Yeah. Well, and then also when they pick the comfort, he kind of says again, is like, "Got to get something we can share with Drew when he gets back," and I literally wrote what in my notes because I hadn't realized that he was probably actually defending Drew, and perhaps was even feeling a little overly defensive about Drew because maybe it was like, well, he's my buddy, but I can see other people being annoyed with him.
Yeah.
And so maybe he was just sort of feeling the need to try to be that bridge a little bit. Like, oh, he doesn't mean it. He's okay.
Yeah,
That sort of thing.
Maybe he thought this was a whole plan of, oh well, Drew's been kind of annoying with this fishing gear thing, so I'm gonna send him because I trust him, and also so that everybody will forget that he was being an asshole about the fishing gear.
Yeah. I wondered about that, but like at this point, because I don't even remember where I heard it, but I had picked up somewhere along the line that someone was going to try to throw something, or they said something about it that was going to happen in this episode, but that was really all I knew. So at that point, I wondered if what that meant was the rest of the tribe was going to try to throw the challenge to get rid of him, which still would have been very stupid. But I wondered if that was going to be it, and so when John was defending him, I was like, are they like deliberately trying to play it up like he's awesome for the other team's benefit or something? Like, so I wondered that, but obviously the real answer turned out to be much more simple, which is that John and Drew were running around like 5-year-olds, which was a colorful way to describe it.
Yeah.
I just still loved that whole bit of he pulls his weight for the most part, unless you're napping. Because you could just see how, like, even as he was trying to say it, you could see him realizing the rest of the tribe was rolling their eyes. Like, he had to keep qualifying it. But anyway, I think the tribe was probably smart to get the, because it's one thing to pitch it as comfort, and, the blankets and the hammock are nice, but the tarp is going to be a huge thing if they get rain, right? I mean, yeah. So in some ways it's one thing to say comfort, but comfort is a little more extreme than just like, oh, a pillow.
Right.
So this is the bit where we had Keith.
No, go ahead.
This is the bit where we had Keith look for the idol, not find it, and then go tell Reed. And I wonder if, this is something we didn't really discuss earlier. I wonder if part of what his reaction there is that he felt like he kind of got busted looking for it by Reed.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's part of why he felt like he needed to say something about it. Like, so people wouldn't think he already had it when he really didn't at that time.
I think there was a lot of complicated things going on with that. I think that was a piece of it. I think he probably was like actually thinking that he might have found it, and probably a little hurt that Jeremy had it and hadn't shared with him.
Yeah, maybe.
Just well, like Jeremy was mad that that he didn't come to him. Like, it's almost like there's this bond that they just couldn't quite figure out how to make work. Like they had it, but Keith just wasn't like doing the thing. Like, so Keith thought Jeremy wasn't sharing with him about the idol. Jeremy couldn't understand why Keith didn't confront him personally. Like they can't seem to like get on the same page. It's almost like they want to be allies, but they're not really to be.
It's funny because I really hadn't even considered it this way until just now, but just that idea of because Keith really did believe that Jeremy had it, that would mean Jeremy has it and didn't tell me. Mm-hmm. And so on that basis, why would he feel like he needs to keep that information secret, especially if he's really thinking of it as a larger group and not just him and Jeremy anyway? So, maybe, we can understand why Jeremy was mad, but maybe maybe Keith had some more justification for what he did, too. I mean, he still didn't play it great, but maybe there was a little more merit to why he felt like he wanted to do that.
Right.
Anyway, so that all didn't go very well, but then just the amazing irony of the whole thing is that Keith then did actually find it and then not tell anybody. So after that whole thing, and then having that even blow up and be a bigger thing, but now after all that, he really does have it. I thought that was kind of funny.
I thought it was really funny. So.
Meanwhile, over at Coyopa, Alec is not getting along with his tribe mates either, or at least not with Baylor. Boy, those two siblings are troubled. Because on the one hand, Drew definitely seems like the older brother screw up. But Alex definitely got that whole bitter younger sibling thing going down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, actually, it's like, oh, well, my dad never let me get away with anything. He let Drew get away with everything. He let him sleep and bring me out to wash the car because he knew Drew wouldn't be good.
See why these guys got chosen. Because they're so perfect for what Survivor wants out of them.
Mm-hmm. But on the one hand, if he really feels like Baylor is half-assing stuff, it's one thing for him to be annoyed by that. But on the other hand, that whole bit where he's explaining why he's being so hard on her, I thought her response was just right, which is that kind of sarcastic, well, like, thanks for sharing your received wisdom with me. You know, it's like, I'm so glad to benefit from, you telling me I'm doing everything wrong, like, and somehow that's going to help me, like, like somehow it's his job to help her become a better person.
Yeah.
But no,
I liked her a lot better this episode than, not that I disliked her or thought she should go, but I was kind of prepared for like the narrative they had built as to why she was like gonna be the one to go before blocking John. But
last time it was just weird stuff with her last time. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I liked her better this time.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I did too, and especially just because I really felt on her side in the sense of he seemed like he was overreacting and snapping at her a lot for petty stuff, which he then doubled down on by making this decision to call her out on everything she does, and then trying to justify it based on traumatic memories of his own childhood. And then to explain to her why it's really it's in her best interests, really.
And I wondered a little bit how much, because the childhood thing was done in a confessional, right?
Yeah. Well, but then he told her about it too.
Well, that's what I was saying, is that I wonder how much of it was prodded by producers.
Oh, yeah. Like, maybe he repeated it to her.
Yeah, like, well, why do you feel like you need to correct her?
Mm-hmm.
No, think of something. Is there anything that might happen, like, between you and Drew that would make you feel this way? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then my dad did this, and this. It's like, yeah, that's perfect, thanks. Go on back to the tribe. And he was like, wait a minute, that's exactly why, Baylor. So I feel like they're instigating it a little bit, but they're getting what they want.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, what was happening?
Are we at the part where Julie was talking about her reactions to
John? We got a couple of sequences of that, but it's a good time to talk about that, I guess. What do you think about that?
It's mixed, because when I first saw it, like, just taking it face value, okay, if I was just walked in and saw that conversation, I love what Julie said. Like, she owned up to it, like, just, and is like, look, he's the love of my life. I've lost him, but he does that. And so I was starting to prepare myself to play my own game. all that sounded awesome. Like, it was great. It was acknowledging who he is as a person.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice because we understand that their relationship isn't bullshit because she knows what he's like and has chosen him anyway. That she's acknowledging this is not like, she's not turning a blind eye to his stuff and
Mm-hmm.
being like, oh, why does everybody always hate John? You know, it's, yeah, he does things that piss people off, but I happen to love him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I liked all of that. But then I started to think back to the way she behaved when people were, like, getting on him, and
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't really owning it as much then. So I give her credit for, like, coming around, but she's not as, you know, she seems so self-aware and so aloof in a good way to the situation, not, like, to people,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good way to be aloof in something like this. But she clearly wasn't when he was getting bad-mouthed because she was so emotional and she, like, stormed off. So I'm not down on it, but I really did, at face value, I loved it. When thinking back to how she sort of behaved the whole way through, I still like it, but not at the same level. That's
Yeah.
how I feel.
I tend to agree. I think she was handling it much better this time than last time. Of course, last time, I mean, the big difference between last time is when everybody was still really angry with him and talking about what an awful person he is and demanding that the other team vote him out, and then specifically trash talking and picking fights. Whereas this time, he's gone. That battle's over. Everybody's calmed down. You can see how that would be an easier landscape to navigate.
Absolutely, which is why when it still comes down to it, I'm happy with the way the scene went. And
Mm-hmm.
I do like, I mean, you can't deny the fact that it's nice to know that she's, she is a real person who does love this guy, knows he has flaws, has accepted them, and is not in denial. Because that not that it's the same as being in like being in an abuse relationship, but some of the psychological parts are the same that you could worry about for her.
Mm-hmm.
That she just deny that he acts like this and be like, why does everybody always hate him? Everybody's always against him. I don't understand it. But no, she totally understands it and is okay with it. And
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that. It was nice. It was really nice to see. There were some really good couple moments in this episode.
Yeah. Well, and then I agree too that from a gameplay perspective, this I think is certainly the best approach for her to take moving forward too.
Yeah.
So let's see.
Now we're manipulating minds.
Yeah. So we have Drew at Exile Island. Doesn't really even try to keep his clue hidden, I guess. Says, this is where he's saying some pretty douchey stuff. He's gone on about how he's so much of a ladies' man. He doesn't even try to hit on girls. It's really a curse. It's like
Yeah.
so transparent. It's like, oh my God.
I'm here with this like Miss Michigan with this body, and she's just flaunting it at me, and I'm just gotta because it's my boy's girl, I just have to deny myself.
Right. And then meanwhile she's laughing at him, going like, boy, his brother told me he was like a ladies' man, but boy. Because I don't know. I mean, I'm just watching him, and I'm just feeling like, I don't know. He makes me feel like saying mean things to him, which I don't know what that means exactly. But I just found myself thinking. So what I was going to say is, like, hey man, maybe 5-6 years ago you were still hot enough to get away with that kind of behavior, but you're getting older now. But then I was just also realizing, like, that's kind of a mean thing to say. I don't really know him that well, but I'm also just recognizing that the way he acts makes me feel like saying stuff like that to him.
And he deserves it, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, the other thing is, too, for all of his talk about he's not going to hit on his boy's girl.
Really did.
Not only did he kind of, but also just like the whole blurting out that he's going to throw the challenge thing, that really felt like him trying to impress her.
Yeah, that's what I meant when he kind of did. Like,
yeah.
He said things that, were not in his own best interest to try to impress a girl. Like, that's kind of how, like, hitting on people works,
Yeah, well, and he's also given her tons of intel about their tribe. Telling her all about all the different dynamics and everything. Making sure to include lots of self-compliments while he does so.
That's hitting on people, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, throwing the challenge. So like, as we're getting in towards the challenge, and he says again in the confessional that he's planning to throw it, I'm just, like even at this point, this is where I started wondering if he was deliberately self-sabotaging, and I think now that we've talked through it, I don't think that's the case. But since it's not, it just does mean he's that dumb that he just really didn't realize that, like, it.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know. I was kind of rambling about it at that point.
I was at the point where I thought this was like an edit thing, like it was some BS red herring. Like, he said it in the moment because he was trying to impress the girl, but he's not going to go through with it, and it's just going to be a normal episode. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
When he said this, I was like, this isn't going to end well. Like, this is going to go nuts. If he actually, because he sounds committed to it.
It's pretty much the worst.
Here's the part, though, where I want to give him a little bit of credit. Let me just get this over with because I don't really like doing it.
Sure.
He did manage to throw the challenge without arousing suspicion that he had done so. He did that very well.
Yeah.
That was the best part of all of his gameplay ever.
I think, though, what was interesting about that is that the only reason that the deception was effective is because it was so perfectly in character that he would be not good at something and not acknowledge that. You know what I mean? That he would play so poorly and yet just like, oh, well, I can't win them all. And then, like, in Tribal Council, he's talking about, it's like, maybe we would have won if we had faster swimmers. It's like, dude, what?
That's why I said I have to give him credit. Like, he played the loss to who he is as a person. Like, he blamed other people. Like, he did all that stuff. It's not an easy thing to do, to throw a challenge, and because Probst, if you're doing poorly, Probst calls you out, and if he thinks you're doing it on purpose, he will call you out, and he managed to like go under Probst's radar.
Probst kind of pushed on it a little bit in Tribal Council, but didn't cross the line of actually specifically asking. But
in Tribal Council, Probst probably is prepped with the information that he did do that.
Yeah, but he pushed gently on it. Yeah,
in Challenge, he did not necessarily do it, and nobody came back and was like, we need to get rid of Drew. He massively screwed that up. They got rid of Drew because he wouldn't let go of the Kelly thing. Like, the challenge thing had nothing to do with it. So, like I said, it kills me, but I have to give him credit for that. He did expertly throw a challenge without arousing suspicion.
Yeah,
it was a terrible idea, and he terribly executed what he planned to do after that. But that part he was good at.
Yeah, it's funny because I kept feeling like as I was watching it that I didn't think he was lying very well. But at the same time, I think it's also true. We have the benefit of knowing for a fact that he threw it and that he's lying now. So there's that. But then also just the idea that I think it's reasonable for his teammates to not suspect someone to do something that dumb. Like, it would take a lot of evidence to convince me that someone would feel like that was actually a good idea. We have the evidence because we saw him talk about it. But the idea that he actually just wasn't very good at the challenge does seem more plausible. But yeah, I kept groaning every time he would, like, his whole "sorry guys," I just felt like, I don't believe it for a second. But anyway, then we get his whole, "if I don't want to win, we're not going to win, and that's what makes me the kingpin of my tribe."
He also said, I don't know where he said this, but I just wrote it down because I love this misuse of the phrase. He said something about how he could care less. About, it was like, oh, are they going to be upset with me? I could care less. You could, huh? So it is possible for you to care less.
Yeah. I'm going to give him the credit only in the sense that lots of people make that mistake, I think. But yeah, it is, it's so obvious when you just think about it for a second.
Yeah.
I
could care less.
So that means you do care at least a little.
Yeah.
You can quote Weird Al's Word Crimes song. It talks about that.
Yes, it does. I forgot about that. I love that song.
Yeah.
I don't know anymore, but.
Sorry, dropping stuff. But yeah, I agreed though that is, sure, lots of people do it, but it's also still kind of dumb, and so he's in that company. But yeah, so he's basically, I'm a badass manipulator of this game. He keeps repeating this whole idea of, got to get out the snakes. The snakes, got to get out the snakes. And, I don't know that it's about, misogyny with him, but it was certainly true that all the snakes he was talking about were women.
Yeah.
And it also seemed clear that it's not like there was one or two of the women that he was on board with, and it was only the others he didn't like. It was basically, got to get all the women out, because they're going to team up on us. And now it was Kelly specifically that he felt like he had to get rid of first, but it's not like he was trying to ally with some of the others in order to get Kelly out. So, yeah. I don't know. I don't want to put too much emphasis on that point, but he did keep using the terminology of got to get the snakes out.
Oh, yeah. There was a thing. Once he's decided, he's decided. He decided they were snakes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then just that dramatic bit where John is just, Drew's just walked up, and John is saying, okay, so here's what I'm thinking. I think we get out Julie because of, and he doesn't even get to finish the sentence, and Drew's just like, there's no reason to vote out Julie right now. John's like, wait, let me finish. Let me at least say what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, let me give you the reason.
Let me explain the reason that I do have to vote her out. As opposed to you saying that there's no reason before you've listened to my reason. But then, yeah, so beyond even the dumbness of trying to throw the challenge, there was this whole idea of he just really was convinced that he was the leader of this tribe, and therefore it was his duty to dictate terms to everybody. And it was a mess. It was a mess. Just like Natalie said, hot mess. That phrase is everywhere now. I feel like I had never heard it even just 2 years ago, and now it's all over the place.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I believe it's a thing. I just, I don't know if it was like regional before and now it's gone mainstream or what. But I think they said it they used it in Arrested Development, but I don't know if that was what gave it national prominence or not. I don't know. I think was it a New York thing?
It had national prominence prior to that, and that was a reflection of it.
Yeah, I don't know. You might be right. So anyway, we talked already about the implications of John's strategy to vote out singles. We also still have Jeremy that's mad at Keith. We have Natalie thinking that Drew's whole guy-girl logic is dumb, and the other girls agreeing because it's like we don't even have the numbers for that now. Anyway, and he is not even talking to us, and he is talking about voting out Kelly in front of Kelly, and saying things. Yeah, and then saying things to Missy like, we don't even trust you to vote, which I loved. I loved John in that bit because as Drew says that, John is just like reeling at his friend. He's like, "Whoa, dude! Like, what are you doing?" So I think it's to John's credit that he did not vote with Drew for Kelly. You know what I mean? I think he recognized, even though he was confused, he recognized that that was not happening. That just because Drew was out there telling everybody to vote for Kelly, that was not how things were going down. And even voting for Keith, I mean, after the whole discussion about what Keith did, regards to Jeremy, Keith in the tribal council conversation, Keith was the one that came out of that looking bad, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is why I think we were both wondering if he might actually play his idol, but. So here's a good question. Why really do you think Drew was so fixated on Kelly specifically? Why do you think he was right that she is the mastermind of the girls?
No.
I didn't think so either, but what do you think? What do you think?
That's why I kept reflecting back to Brandon Hands, where it's like, for whatever reason, something about her has made him want to get rid of her, and I don't know if it's the same thing. I don't think he was like, oh well, I'm attracted to Kelly, and that's a bad thing that she's wooing me with her wiles,
I think objectively she is probably the hottest of the girls there, right? I mean, at least by conventional Western standards of beauty and all that.
I mean, probably. Julie is not, obviously Julie has had some enhancements to make herself.
She's a little older though.
Yeah, and she has obviously a boyfriend, whereas Kelly is, seen by the tribe as a single girl, right. So therefore a available one. Yeah, so it might be that, but it for whatever reason it was, he had made this decision. But when we see how he makes decisions, there's not necessarily any logic behind it.
Like maybe she just snapped at him once, and that was enough for him to say, "Oh, she doesn't like me."
Right, or maybe one day he said out loud, Kelly would be good to vote out, and then he decided, well, I said that out loud, so it's definitely the right thing. I don't think there's any reasoning behind it. It was absurd, and he was just so singularly focused on her for no particular reason, So I don't know why. He never gave a reason why, except that she was the mastermind. Which we've never really seen. Maybe his thing is maybe it really is what Kelly said, which is that he doesn't like strong females, and she has exhibited herself as the strongest female.
Mm-hmm.
You know, none of them are weak by any means, but Julie has had the moments where she's had to walk off and like have her emotional moments. You know, Natalie behaves strong, but you can tell it's kind of a front. You know, it's a lot of, she says a lot of things emotionally, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But she's clearly like very dependent on her sister. Like, Kelly is the most independently like strong of all of them, and maybe that is the reality. Like she said, he's intimidated by that, and that's what makes her the mastermind, because she's the only one who seems to be able to operate as an independent.
Well,
and
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. That was the end of it.
Well, so I think it might even be the combination of that piece plus the attraction piece. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, like he doesn't think of Missy that way because she's older. Julie is also she's a little older than he is, but also because she has a boyfriend, and there's the whole thing of not only does she have a boyfriend, but he's ex-professional baseball player and big and got all this other baggage going on. So, and then you know, without wanting to, I don't think it's a racial thing necessarily, but Natalie is, you know, she's more foreign, you know what I mean? So it's maybe like not his type in that way. And so if Kelly is simultaneously the one that he would consider the hottest, and she's strong, that combination means that she's going to be central in his attention when he thinks about the women on the tribe.
Yep.
You know, because it doesn't have to be quite the same thing as we saw with Brandon, which is you're hot, so that makes me uncomfortable, and I got to get rid of you. I'm threatened by that. It can be less dramatic than that, and still just be that's maybe why he pays the most attention to her.
Yep.
Because, you know, he at least was not blaming it on her, you know, flirting around and stuff. That's not what his logic was. But so anyway, the key discussion, I think, in the tribal council was the whole bit of Drew saying that, you know, they want to get rid of the bad energy. And Kelly saying, yes, I agree, but I don't think the tribe agrees on who that is. So, yeah, I think that part of the reason that Drew seemed to take it so well and to even not be surprised is probably because he built it up in his head that they recognized I'm a serious threat and they had to get rid of me. Because that's how he was thinking.
Yep.
So, in the end, he was the worst. I'm glad he's gone.
Yep. Me as well.
I'm enjoying the season so far. What about you?
Yeah, I like it. It's, you know, they've done a good job with all the things that I like. You know, interesting challenges, good character drama, high-level personalities. Yeah, everything. I like it.
I feel like it's sooner than I want there to be a mix-up. I mean, I know it's not really that early in the grand scheme of things compared to other seasons, but just for these two groups of people, I feel like there's more that could be mined from exploring these existing dynamics rather than just mixing it all up again. But I'm sure that will be interesting too. But I guess I just sort of feel like I would have maybe preferred one or even two more episodes before a mix-up or some other change like that.
I agree.
I mean, if nothing else, we want to see what the fallout of this one is going to be. I mean, I guess we'll get a little bit of that next time probably, but they're going to mix. They were at the Hero Arena when they got the drop your buffs, so probably they mix up before the dual challenge.
Yep.
Anyway, we will see. It looks like at least some of the immediate fallout is that John is very unhappy, so I'm a little sad to see that, just because I kind of like John, so at the same time I think perhaps his friendship with Drew was not one of the best things about his gameplay so far, and if he's going to blow up on everybody as a result, that's probably just going to make it worse.
Yep.
But yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah. So I think that probably does it for this time.
Yep.
Thank you for watching or listening, everybody, and we'll be back next week. Remember, you can find the podcast notes at christianaellis.com.